police chiefs today, they work under much more difficult situations. There certainly isn't much money available as there was when I was serving. And unfortunately, as we all know, state laws have changed. And the amount of protections there for police chiefs, they simply are not anywhere near as solid as they were during the time when I was a chief. I was a chief from 1992 to 2003. I had a pretty good place to work in the town of Colony. For the most part, I had supportive politicians, and I had great people to work with, all the way up through the ranks. So I was pretty fortunate. But I can tell you, since moving over to the State Chiefs Association and kind of having a bird's eye view of all the problems that even typical police chiefs can face, I can say, with no hesitation, it's a very, very difficult job these days. Certainly more difficult than it was when I was there. And these days, for a person to think seriously about becoming a police chief, they really have to think harder, I think, than, say, when I started in 1992. As I've already stated, some of the protections, like General Municipal Law 207M, they are no longer in place. There's another bit of law called the Term Limits Doctrine that can also have a major impact on a police chief's career today. So before you even decide that you want to make a serious attempt at becoming a police chief in your municipality, you really have to examine whether or not you're willing to face the absolute real-life uncertainty that comes along with the job right now. Even though you may not think a police chief's job is all of that political, it's obvious that the people who control your life and your job, they are 100% political. Police chiefs have been asked to not arrest people who are absolutely guilty of serious crimes, and the request is made out of political consideration. Police chiefs are asked not to hire people just based on their political affiliations. Requests for promotions are made not necessarily for candidates who are the best qualified. And these things, they're at different degrees, really. And so how you respond to each one kind of depends on just how serious and how far out of your ethical compass these requests are. In some cases, in some of the most egregious examples of improper requests for a police chief probably has to be prepared to either resign or to go report the case to some other law enforcement authority. In other cases, maybe when you're just asked to hire someone who, in your opinion, is not the most qualified, you may have to say that this is not the one that I'm going to fight today, and I'm going to try and make my best case for the best qualified candidates. But the point I'm making here is that you really should have a strong ethical guideline to follow. There will be times when you are asked to stray from that, and depending upon how serious of the request is when it comes to deviating from your ethical compasses, you may have to be prepared to take some pretty serious action. Just negotiating the political landscape without some of the protections that were in place prior to 2011. Everybody knows the 207M was in place probably to the Mandate Relief Act there, or 207M was repealed in 2011. But right now, police chiefs are really just out there. And there are cases where you can do absolutely the best possible job, make all the right decisions. In some cases, that's not going to be enough. If you're not willing to go along with some requests or some inferences that you should be doing something one way, no matter how good of a job that you've done up to that point, the next time you come up for a raise, or the next time you have to go to those elected leaders and ask for some assistance or support in something that you're trying to accomplish, for no reason other than the fact that you didn't work with them the last time around, you may not get what you want. And like I say, These days, it's far more difficult than it was when I was a police chief. I can recite story after story across the state over the last couple of years where very solid, experienced police chiefs really had to make a hard decision on to whether or not they were going to stay in that position, and a lot of them didn't. I know plenty of cases where people had their compensation packages cut. Even prior to 2011, most often police chiefs weren't the highest compensated person in a police department simply because they weren't in the bargaining unit or they didn't get overtime. Now, police chiefs have fallen so much further down the ladder in terms of compensation that I'm afraid that in the future, some of your best qualified individuals in the department are not even going to consider taking the jobs, and what you're going to end up with in some cases are people who are just willing to take the job without ever thinking about some of the serious challenges that may await them. Rank than you. I think it's still possible to go in and be an effective police chief, do a good job, especially when it comes to dealing with all these different challenges. You can probably still do it in most municipalities. I don't mean to imply that there's rampant corruption throughout the state. However, you have to keep in mind that you are working in a political environment, and it's probably going to be a mistake if you completely ignore the political environment. And on the other hand, it's probably going to be a mistake if you get too involved in that political environment. If you get too involved and say you're the mayor or the supervisor who promoted you to that position loses an election or desires to move on and somebody else becomes the mayor or town supervisor, there's a good chance that he's going to see you as really being loyal to someone else, and there's a good chance that he or she will want to bring in their own person. And obviously that immediately becomes a problem for you. Going into the job, establish a solid ethical compass. Do your best not to deviate from it, but you also have to understand is that sometimes you have to realize you have a boss. You are not the final word in a lot of these cases, and you have to accept a decision from someone above you don't agree with it simply because they are the boss. The worst case scenario is when someone would ask you to do something that is blatantly illegal, and in that case, and I've seen this happen before, I've seen people in government either resign or take a case to a district attorney.